The chatter, that was once so immense you could barely hear your own thoughts, had decreased to a low murmur. And the music, blaring with its booming and bombastic bass moments before, has switched to melancholic instrumentations. The theater kids had gotten hold of the sound system. A wave of people that had flooded the living room and the surrounding hallways had since vanished, leaving stragglers to clean and swing their way through the wreckage. Clothing, glasses, furniture, knickknacks, and other household objects were scattered throughout, leaving a minefield of mysticism. I have had only 2 beers thus far, surely not enough for any significant damage, but as I gaze upon the remains of those passed out, or nearing such a state, I am left unsure about whether or not I want to meet such peril. The kitchen has a warm glow. Those who were conscious or confident enough to be were leaning against the granite countertops, deep in contemplative discussions. Upon entering, I was enthusiastically greeted by Marvin Smith, the resident hippie, by far the smartest kid in the school, and probably the entire town, though if you were to get close, you would believe he had a pet skunk who wasn't all that fond of his presence. "Hello, Marvin," I spewed, nervous. Adjoining him in a circle were Charles McCain, Stephen Ice Hameline, Brittany Richards, Corey Fitzsimmons, Elliot Summers, and Ryan Squeaky Smith, no relation to Marvin. Anybody who was anybody at school was in that kitchen. Brittany served as head cheerleader, with Corey acting as her second-in-command. Corey was the more intelligent one, whereas Brittany would hang with those types of people to boost her ego and status. Elliot was the single best basketball player ever to attend our prestigious institution, and held the state record for highest score achieved in a single game for girls basketball. Her record was also higher than any of the boys' records. Charles was a math wizard who attended several competitions but never brought any accolades home with him. Our school administration felt an odd repulsion towards him after placing 4th or 5th in the state. Stephen, who earned his nickname due to his abnormally cold temperature compared to every other living organism on the planet, was, by all definitions, a trust fund kid. So predictable at that, too. His father owned the largest amount of real estate within the county, as well as the 4 other surrounding counties. And his mother was the heir to an enormous pharmaceutical company, which I cannot disclose at the moment as they continue to fight multiple lawsuits. Ice was handed everything he ever wanted, but all he truly wants is to study philosophy, which his parents adamantly contest. And Ryan was Ryan, the notorious high school bully who most certainly wouldn't amount to much after graduation. Trying just a little too hard, he purposefully gave himself the name Squeaky after his new pair of shoes squeaked all through the first day of freshman year. He had a brief fling with Brittany, but was utterly convinced that she still had feelings for him. Brittany may have had a few screws loose, but even she could see the football Neanderthal for who he truly was. Marvin motioned for me to come over. "Come here and join us. Would be nice to get some insight other than Stephen's pretentious musings." Their debate hinged on whether Freud was a genius or not. Stephen was of the mindset that all of Freud's writings were entirely factual and should be held to the highest regard, going so far as to crack a joke about Jessica Sampson, the most promiscuous and sexually experimental girl in the school, having daddy issues, which he attributes to the writings of Freud. Corey and Elliot took offense to the joke. Brittany, upon seeing their disgusted faces, too became enraged, though remained silent. As if preparing every syllable to recite, Marvin rebuted with his extensive knowledge of Freud's many fallacies and addictions. These addictions, Marvin claimed, resulted in half-assed ramblings reminiscent of a tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist who really needed to get laid. Their attention then turned to me. Everyone's eyes pierced my stunned face as I struggled to gather my thoughts in a coherent manner before finally speaking. And to this day, I am still impressed with how I conducted myself. My remarks and facts rest on him being crazy and no one should take him seriously, due in part by his destructive addictions, his only true passion to become famous, and that the majority of his writings being highly misogynistic. Upon the mention of misogyny, Ryan seethed and ran into a tirade on how men can't do anything these days without being called a misogynist, to which Corey and Elliot began berating him. To no avail, with Brittany leading the attack in a rare instance of her in control. Their squabble faded into the background as Marvin made his way towards me, shaking his head. "Some people just want to remain in the past," he scolded. "But alas, the only thing we can do is shake our heads disapprovingly, drink as to drown them out, and move forward. What's your poison?" I had never spoken to Marvin for more than a quick hello as we scurried down the halls in between classes, so finally having the opportunity to hear him speak with such poise was a shock. It took a few moments to understand what he had asked me before responding with the beers I had. Marvin scoffed and reached behind him for a bottle of bourbon and a red plastic cup before filling it with around 3 ounces of whiskey. He then turned back around and poured himself the same amount. Casually, we raised our cups and toasted to the moments that define who we are. Whatever that meant. I gagged as I took my first sip. The oaky, acidic texture of the bourbon assaulted my throat as it burned its way down. But then, the appalling tang quickly shifted to a sweeter, fruitier taste, before leaving a maple finish to roam about. Such a complex palate experience, one I have never had before, and I was hooked. I drowned myself with as much as I could handle before Marvin interjected, informing me that whiskey is meant to be savored, to be enjoyed with every last drop until the next glass. I had drunk half of my cup at this point, so I would take his advice and begin to nurse it. He was right. Towards the end of my drink, the girls seemed to have had enough of Ryan and left the circle to socialize with others. As I turned my head to watch them leave, the room spun counter to my actions. Stabilizing myself, I rotated my body back towards the 3 left, noticing Ryan had gone, into a void I couldn't make out. Without a word, I motioned for Marvin to top me up. The conversation at this point had lost me, so I stood there, nodding along to no one in particular, until my drink had come and gone. Marvin, interrupting Stephen in the middle of his pointless rant, took note of my empty cup, my second empty cup. A hearty laugh erupted throughout the kitchen after my amusing inquiry for yet another, and as Marvin reached for the bottle once again, he glanced over at the oversized and tacky clock hanging on the wall. He pepped up, as if all the drugs in his system that were keeping him down had worn off all at once. Apologizing profusely, Marvin talked over himself. Something about someone he had to meet that night, and if he didn't leave that instant, he would be late. Understanding, somewhat, we told him to go. Remaining apologetic, he continued and went on with how he would soon be late for his meeting. Reaching the exit, he spins around and proclaims, "Till we meet again and the sun shines bright, may your travels and experience bring you peace and happiness." He was a character. And with that, I was alone with Stephen and Charles. Not that I didn't enjoy their company, it's that I never spent any real quality time with either of them. Previously, Stephen and I had been in a few classes together, but typically stuck within our respective cliques. And with our differing viewpoints coming to light, the chance of that changing is growing smaller. He's even quoted Anne Rind in the past. As for Charles, our correspondence amounted to not much after the results of his victories during our time in chess club. We stand in our broken circle, awkwardly glancing around the emptying kitchen, attempting to wrangle even the slightest of conversations. I heaved a lengthy sigh and reached for the bottle of bourbon resting on the counter, with Charles breaking the silence, asking if we had read any interesting books recently. Stephen pounced on the question, regurgitating useless dribble from his latest literary endeavor. Charles and I stand with wide and droopy eyes as this man reciting the entire book to us, interspersed with his flawed interpretations. As his ramblings came to a close, we didn't know what to think. Did he enjoy the book? More excited than he had been that evening, Charles dove into the premise of a horror novel he had finished the other day, to which Stephen scoffed. "Cheap thrills are the poor man's exhilarating thriller," he declared pompously, his arrogance shining. Not being one for confrontation, Charles reverts to his quiet nature. But myself, being a self-proclaimed horror aficionado, I couldn't stand by while this conceited bonehead riffed on one of literature's most profitable genres. "You know," I proudly stammered, "horror is often used to construct meaning in life. How people behave in given situations. Criticizes society." With a sigh, Stephen blasted us with nothing new that evening, doing whatever he could to put us down and prop himself, and more importantly his mind, up. He was so predictable. Feeding off my initial comment, Charles barked at Stephen with newfound glee for his misunderstanding of the genre. Going back and forth, the two of us list example after example of works to back our claim, allowing Stephen not even a chance to utter as much as a syllable as his mouth hangs open like a lobotomy victim. After a while, Charles takes control of the narrative as I fade into the background, a passive spectator. The joy of witnessing Stephen being ripped into and humiliated kept my interest to the point I hadn't even noticed the amount of whiskey I was consuming. And by the time Stephen stormed off in heat, my cup was again empty. An eternal silence commenced, the remnants of the party obscured behind us. My eyes peered at the cup in my hand, then back towards the bottle as my thoughts became cloudy. Thankfully, a member of the chess team entered the kitchen and greeted Charles. The pair began to talk among themselves, shoving me out of the now non-existent circle. As they discussed sleeping arrangements for the upcoming state chess tournament, I grabbed the bourbon, pour myself another glass, and leave the kitchen to wander. My legs sway and clunk among the pristine hardwood floor as I, oh so graciously, glide through the house. A large Gothic revival monstrosity, the layout is simple, yet decadent. The interior design, however, was inspired by the ancient Greeks, with gigantic white spiraling beams resting along nearly every entryway. Exiting the kitchen, I am thrown to a long hallway. To my left, a gaggle of partiers strung out in heated debates about who in school did in fact have the biggest ass. Beyond them was the door to the basement, a feat I do not wish to tempt. To my right, which I could only view after shifting my weight with the force moving my body, opens to the living room. Beside that was the front door, which looked upon a grand staircase. In my stupor, I wouldn't walk downstairs, but I was willing to walk up them. I make my way towards the front of the house, gripping the smooth wall to keep my balance. The fixtures on the wall shift with a jerky movement as I take each step, and as I steady myself with my confidence growing, it would do it again. My body freezes as I reach the bottom of the staircase, the cold stone magnificent. Bracing myself, I glance to the right to see an empty den I hadn't noticed before. Reverting back to the stairs, I grab the banister tightly with determination and pull myself up like a climber ascending a mountain. My body leans to the side without my consent as I reach the midpoint, with half of me hanging over the railing. Checking behind, I notice the steps at the bottom to be wider than the one I am on, and the ones I will soon be. I'm not going crazy. With whiskey in hand, I take a large gulp, making me gag, but another large sip is taken soon after. As the cup leaves my lips and the whiskey runs down my throat, I succumb to a dizzying spell, and as my weight shifts backwards, coupled with the fear of tumbling down, adrenaline shoots through me, and I hurry up the stairs, gasping for air as I complete my journey, resting on the top step. The staircase was taller than anticipated. The faint hum of the music echoes gently through the upstairs as my breathing stabilizes. It felt as though the stairs transported me to a new dimension, a different realm that was my own. Bright, colorful lights strewn about shone most of the second level, which created a U shape around the house. Beside each door was a small table with an equally small statuette on top, and paintings hanging from the walls, some in frames while others not. Struggling at first, I make it to my feet and plod towards one end of the hallway to take in the art. Lush green grass overtakes the bottom third of the canvas, strokes so meticulous and fine one could count each individual strand. In the bottom left corner, a golden retriever carries a large stick in his powerful mouth. And resting in the middle, peacefully staring up at the vast night sky, as black as can be, with its twinkling stars scattered abundant, is a man dressed in 19th century attire. A dreary, dimly lit bar with consistent haze surrounds a middle-aged man in a suit seated at the counter, sulking. The bartender, with a scowl and small scar running across his face, wipes the opposite side of the counter. An older gentleman, chomping on a cigar butt, sits at a table behind the man, numerous shot glasses sprawled out within reach, his best years behind him, and he does not care to grasp them again. A young couple, deep in thoughtful conversation, their smiles hiding secrets, sit together in the back corner, upper left-hand side, in front of a frosted window. Christmas lights are tacked along the bar and hanging haphazardly on the walls, with a wreath dangling from the doorway. Dark brown and muted grays permeate the piece, while the brush strokes are harsh, swirled, and incomplete. A chaotic mash of colors seething with anger peers through the canvas. Soft and warm blue spots sprinkled indiscriminately, bringing with it unwarranted anxiety. Various shades of red and oval patterns scatter the piece, bleeding their color around the edges. A smeared mixture of green, brown, and yellow encompass much of the remaining space, entrapping a singular character within its confines. A face. Hidden, almost, the elongated face stares with a blank expression, yet its eyes are wide, with deep, dark bags underneath. Its nose, flat and stretched. One ear hangs lower than the other, with a rusted chain hanging off. The lips are cracked, the only distinct thing in the entire painting, and their hair thinning and disheveled. Our marble statue stands 4 feet tall on the seemingly flimsy table. It is of a man, sitting on a chair, posing, reminiscent of the thinking man, muscles bulging with so much realism, one must wonder how long it took to carve. One hand reaches across its torso, gripping the arm with a firm grasp. There were even veins. Striking with everlasting masculine beauty, the face is something to marvel at, yet only one side is visible. Chunks of marble have been ripped with such vigor that a crack forms along the entire body, with smaller fractures accompanying it throughout. A muffled noise comes from behind a closed door, breaking my concentration. Attempting to decipher where the sound came from, I fixate on each door around me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. The door directly in front of the stairs swings open, and a couple, or what I perceive to be a couple, exit, giggling, which ceases once they notice me. The guy nods, as the girl stares at her feet, embarrassed. They embrace momentarily, kiss, and whisper to each other. They giggle again. I begin to turn my attention back to the art hanging on the walls, as the guy asks, his voice slurred with echoes, yet remaining hushed, if I want the rest of his joint, since he was about to leave the party. But I decline. I didn't need illicit drugs. Shrugging his shoulders, he takes hold of the girl's hand, and saunter down the stairs and out the burly oak door. The bedroom door now ajar, I creep down the hall and enter. With the sheer size of the house, as well as other rooms used for reference, I was left unsure if this was the master bedroom, but it was commodious. The king bed that lay on the right wall perpendicular to the door takes up a fourth of the room, with its grand bed frame shooting towards the high ceiling, and stack of plush throw pillows scattered. Next to me is a tiny reading nook, complete with the Persian rug and area-appropriate armchair. Across from the bed rests a door leading to a massive ensuite housing a large clawfoot tub with gold-colored faucets to match the dual sinks that sit underneath a mirror twice my size. Beside the bathroom door on either side are two closets for him and her. Being the snooping type, I open them and peer inside, finding a multitude of suits from double-breasted to tuxedos, from light tan to dusty blue. The other closet is filled to the brim with hats, shoes, bags, and dresses, ranging from bodycon to maxi to tea-length, my personal favorite. Growing bored, I close the closets and waltz towards the bedside tables, taking time to relish in the extravagance. Resting in the top drawer are a few intimate toys. Not be one to judge, though after quick observation, whoever these belong to should take extra care at cleaning them. The bottom drawer contained a small prayer book, fitting, I thought, sitting on top of papers, bills, and the like, and upon shuffling around a little, a half-pack of cigarettes with a lone lighter come into view. No one was to see this. Grabbing the cigarettes, along with the lighter, I slug my way to the back of the room that leads to a small balcony. The party is now a distant memory as I gaze upon the vast night sky. Far away from the nuisance of city life, the stars above shine brightly. Crickets down below chirp their nighttime serenade. Everything that matters presents itself and allows no interference. Beckoning, the universe opens and gives way for movement of the orchestra at play. A gentle breeze caresses my body, sending a chill up my spine. I light the cigarette. Taking a deep drag, I hold it for a few seconds, scanning the surrounding woods, and exhale as my eyes meet a lone doe grazing on the pristine grass. It senses my presence as its head pokes up and locks eyes with me. We remain motionless together for a few serene moments, unsure what to do. In no way was he in danger, yet still frightened. Behind, a twig snaps, breaking its concentration, and it scurries deep into the thick trees. With eyes remaining on the trampled ground, I take another heavy, long drag, and that is where the memory fades. The floor vibrates, changing its beat on a whim. Pulsations travel up from the sofa, into my feet, across my legs, through my torso, cascading around my arms, and buzzes in my head. As I stare at the swirling wall, the boom of the music drops and returns to a peaceful silence. With the curtains drawn and lights dim, I sit alone in my house, the crackle of the fire soothing in its destruction as rain pelts the roof with vigor, and the light rustling of leaves as wind gently caresses the earth. Marvin became a writer with a net worth exceeding $60 million due to a long-running young adult science fiction series. I would have thought his books would be more along the lines of Pynchon or Croce. To each their own, I suppose. Brittany would go to be a real estate agent in our hometown. The top agent, I might add. Allegedly, on her wedding day, she filmed her and her husband consummating the marriage to send to Ryan. Corey would fly across the pond to study, where she hoped to be a fashion designer. Acing all of her assignments, she was on track to graduate at the top of her class, even earning an internship at a high-end fashion magazine. If only it wasn't for that drunk driver that fateful rainy day in April. Elliot quit basketball to become an Olympic hopeful. 5 years later, she would be rewarded for her hard work at the Summer Olympics, where she not only won gold for the 300-meter sprint, but shattering a few world records, including the men's, to which she was awarded no more than a certificate and an office alone. Using his mathematical wizardry skills, Charles continued school for a further 8 years. The patience that man exudes is astonishing. All that I know at this time is his employment at CERN. Upon dropping out of his philosophy classes during the first semester, Stephen's mother would gift him her pharmaceutical company, taking over their multiple lawsuits. His real estate endeavors would also begin to grow. He is so predictable. And Ryan was Ryan, barely scraping by at the end of high school, hopping from annoyingly high-paying job to annoyingly high-paying job, while knocking up a few women. Ryan settled down with an old high school flame, pumping an ungodly amount of babies into this world while tinkering with cars to pay the bills. So I sit in my living room, glued to my recliner, with a fresh bottle of bourbon by my side, and remember the past. Not for nostalgic purposes, but for grounding myself, the realization of having it made with no regrets. Life is full of beauty. The beauty of art, of nature, of silence, of architecture, and of mind. I may be here by my lonesome, without the kids and without a partner, but I don't need them. There is a calm that washes over me, that centers me, a light that shines above, casting away all maleficence. All I need is this nearly empty bottle of bourbon and the sweet serenity of art.